Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 9 a.m. session in the Research and Education track. As a reminder to our in-world and web audience, you can view the full conference schedule at conference.opensimulator.org and tweet your questions or comments to @OpenSimCC with the hashtag OSCC14 exclamation point. This hour, we are happy to introduce a session called Metacognition, Prezi, Research, and the 21st Century Scholar. Our speaker today is Maryann DiEdwardo, aka A. Saber. As a professional speaker, author, artist, scholar, writing coach, and adjunct professor, Maryann DiEdwardo works well in editing environments with accuracy and diligence, and most of all, commitment to polished curriculum designs and pedagogy. She has set up model classrooms for many years. Welcome all.
Thank you. Imagination in Teaching and Learning by Kiergan Egan postulates that discussion of imagination draws us to consider memory, metaphor, story, and emotion. In my work at Lehigh University currently in two departments, the undergraduate English department and the graduate department as a writing coach, I use metacognition to teach that student-directed pedagogical models and 21st themes such as Facebook and Twitter and Open Simulator are necessary and vital for reflection, discovery, and achievement. What we are going to do is see how this plan can work for any business setting. The first few slides are setting up background for you so that you can use your own skills to do what I have done, to become part of the 21st century and to reach out through publishing, through your work in modes that will make you not only happy, but successful. So for example, my Prezi, this first link, is something that you could go to later and use or reuse to understand and to see yourself in several links that you can use later. And this link right here may take you into Prezi. You will find a large presentation that has all the research that I am doing here. Teaching and Learning blog. My name is something that I ask every day about what I'm doing, lectures and so forth. And the way to search for that could be possibly my name and blog. I have several blogs, and then if you go to the link, you will find my blog. In the blog, I give freely my papers. My papers are sometimes published in Kindle books, and the Kindle books are ebooks that I'm suggesting that you can publish too. You can create ebooks in Kindle today simply by going into Kindle and also create a YouTube channel. Again, on YouTube, go to Maryann DiEdwardo channel. Find of this research in multiple settings, voice, and sometimes just a picture, or actually my lectures, which I'm taping and putting on YouTube for international conferences to reach out to scholars in every field and to say that it's fine to do everything through technology. We see this in themes that offer strategies for topics, and here, this book is actually transforms the college English classroom as a study, a case study that I did. You can look this up, and it is a formal article that has taken intelligence theory by Howard Gardner, and I suggest by studying 70 community college students over an entire year in 2003, that the results show that the music that we right now today is actually developing and helping us to write. My original case study research is available to you actually for free on my website anytime. To find out how to do this on your own, you can do a simple case study and you don't need to have financial backing. You can do it yourself as a small study, even if you have 5. And you can actually do this on LinkedIn. If you go to Maryann DiEdwardo again on LinkedIn, I do small case studies there all the time, and I could certainly work with you if you would like to work with on a suggested site. Most importantly, we're going to start to think now in our presentation that the object is to change the human mind. I believe that we can actually do this through understanding and looking at the way that we use technology and the way that we think when we're doing it. And the next part of the presentation is now we are studying the science. Metacognition is actually a scientific look at mind, and it is pre-thinking. It's important to use share in any work that you do, whether it's with business, even small groups in your community to make changes. Basically, write. Whether we're writing a fiction story, a nonfiction story, an article, something online, that we're looking at, the community that we're in, and then the way that we the way that that community thinks. Stories created in the new literature become the new voices for a global cultural literature revolution by telescoping into a smaller set of ideas, telling your story and stories that you have done. We're actually sharing through our own experiences, and this is important. This is why we like Facebook and we like Twitter. We like any kind of social contact where people can possibly see a picture of, hear our voice, and language based on this oral history from our past as humans can connect cultures even today. As you can see in my experience, you can actually replace what I'm telling you that I'm doing with your experience. Right now, ask yourself, where are you working? Are you working in areas where you feel that your talents are growing and you are having a voice? In the Cyber University, University of Maryland University College, which I actually just started to work for 5 years ago, I have had a great voice. And this has changed my capacity for technology. The key words in this methodology are pedagogy, or learning to teach in an effective way, and paradigm, which means the classroom becomes flipped, where we would say to our business audience, a business staff, for example. We could say, you're all in LinkedIn, and I want you to read these 5 articles, for example, in LinkedIn, and go into Facebook and find one activity in Facebook that is going to relate to this activity, and then we'll show it to our clients. So you can see how, I'm sure all of you are starting to do this, but what we're going to be doing is thinking about music, photography, art, Pinterest, Twitter, and Facebook as literature, actually as literature, as places to write. Right now I'm trying to help students telescope into active things, taking articles, for example, in blogs, newsletters, or journals, and then read those as though they were books into our communities, more different types of literacy. And I believe that this is going to change the functionality of online use and teaching. Because students can write a few pages of text that can actually be really exciting. And we see them doing this in, of course, small areas, small texts and things like that. And that is pedagogical. Texting is pedagogical. We can actually teach through texting because it is a smaller thought that directs the student to believe in themselves, especially in the era of technology, as we grow from the wave of technology now into a more pluralistic society of understanding these themes. So I want you to think about now, how do you reflect, discover, and social network, and how can you grow with your social networking skills in your own specific field? And I suggest that you do something like this. Think of something right now, just one thing, one idea that's in your head. Share it today with someone. Share it with someone, and then see and reflect on that. So, for example, I'm sharing today that this is a remarkable event for me to be sharing with you on OpenSim. My family knows it, my friends know it, my colleagues know it. And later on, I'll be thinking about that, and they'll ask me how it went. That moment of thought is a learning strategy. And if you can do it spatially, where you're not thinking of it over time, but you're thinking it over space, that means that later on, maybe tomorrow, after you shared it with a friend, you might write it down somewhere. You might record it in a blog. Record it, because if you've recorded it, then you can go back and refer to it. This becomes socialization and, of course, human connection, so that we're absolutely connected to ourselves and our world. In the next slide, we are going to see other mechanisms, and this model that I'm coming up to here is going to help us with metacognition. The next slide is not coming up, so I'm just going to keep talking because this is all about my paper that I have in my hand, and possibly you can see this. Writing short stories in University of Maryland, for example, is really, really helping us to see that we design stories in all different capacities as humans. You can see the slides on Google Docs, and the address on Google Docs is available through Maryann DiEdwardo at Google Docs. We're also going to see, I'm not sure why my slides aren't changing, so I'm just going to keep reading for you. One of the choices that I teach is travel journaling to my students to write. And it's very important to continue writing film analysis, creative nonfiction story, place memory, Facebook pages, audio or video. The 3 important best practices that I'm suggesting that you use is detailing the course, whatever you're teaching, for the first best practice that will keep you paced. Building learning activities aligned with the objectives that you have in business. And incorporating a variety of learning approaches with adult learning principles, because many adults will be working with you. It's also very important to have feedback and visual feedback. So we're going to see different types of feedback, such as feedback in blogs and wikis. One example is to think about the final outcome as a pedagogical model based on intelligence, on life story, and then working in curriculums like oral history and community. So I want you to create a community for yourself. In order to grow, the language that you use represents your culture. And we are journeying through time to develop skills and etymologies in the online community. I use my own writing to suggest to my students that they can also write ebooks. And when we write essays to explore themes about the formation of language, it's very important that we continue writing every day. Writing is a habit that we use every day. In the links that I've given you so far, Prezi and my blog and my YouTube channel, you will find something called a pedagogical framework to use metacognition. It's very important because as you use metacognitive cognition, you will see that you first have a design. Read and discuss your online activities. Deconstruct or design character impersonation videos similar to the OpenSim community. Interpret language using reader response theory, where you allow the people surrounding you to speak and have their own opinions. It's very important to continue to use certain activities like writing process, critique professor, and self-critique. There's a lot of research in the Prezi that I want you to look at, links to writing by other theorists on this topic that I think you will find very, very interesting. But one of the most important things that I'm doing in my teaching right now is that we teach certain authors or certain writers, and you can pick whatever writer you want. But one of the writers that I'm teaching right now is Albert Achebe, Chinua Achebe, born November 30th, 1930. He's a very significant writer to emerge from contemporary Africa with a literary vision that has profoundly influenced the form and content of modern African literature. Now, we're going to look at one of his stories in a minute, and by looking at a short story, we see that that's a unit, a small unit of thought. Stories are small units of thought, and that's what we're looking at in metacognition. It wasn't really until I started to use metacognition that I became more effective with my own success, my own ability to be a scholar. I noticed that I'm doing more writing, maybe 2 or 3 ebooks a year. And this is really very, very exciting because I'm using the story and the Kindle publishing as a theory to promote the understanding of things like history, recalling memoir, narrating, describing, defining, processing. And when you write, you're not only writing for communication online, but I'm trying to explain that as an educational leader on technology settings, your diction counts. So one of the things that you might consider now is how you do blog. And are you writing short and long pieces? Are you engaging your audience and allowing them to use the material with you? For example, do you have a place like Facebook, which is great for response? It's also very exciting to use what I call voice. Developing the voice is what I've been doing in intellectual settings across many, many platforms. And here are some of the things that I've experienced in the last 10 years that may help you develop your career. First of all, in the 25 books that I've published, which I have across the nation and the globe, I'm writing stories not only about place, but also about what I'm doing every day. I'm experienced in designing learning paradigms and structures, so I'm talking to you about those, but it's still a very human thing. It's about everyday, kind of everyday use of technology. How am I actually using technology to benefit my life and my friends and my students? So for the past 7 years at Lehigh University, I've lectured at conferences for English and education and graduate students in things that are going to help them, for example, understanding how to do research and how to start a research paper in a higher level thinking. By actively engaging students and differentiating among major genres, you can converse and analyze and use cultural heritage. Journey through technology one student at a time and let them tell their stories. For example, one student actually talked about her story and told us about her feeling of the death penalty, and she wrote an essay about that. I eventually created an audio and I play the audio to my students within classrooms, or you can send audio as a reminder to students, which is also very, very exciting. So audio is important, and of course video. Take as many videos as you can. Study oral histories. Direct yourself. Take care of yourself within your career. And eventually, you will be able to present to others, even if you start in small groups. It's very exciting to do that. Over and beyond that, I'm also trying to change and develop curriculum design within how we teach our writing departments. So if you have a group of people in a writing department, that would also be very good. For example, you could have your employees or yourself or your small group write reviews and discuss these reviews. And they could be reviews of websites or Facebook or exciting activities. It's also exciting to look at author impersonation. Write a letter to someone else. Help students have metacognition or metacog, smaller units of thinking. You can adapt works. For example, adaptation allows you to adapt memoir or blogs into books. These are really actually important to do because in your home office, you'll have technology comes to life. It's not just in the computer. You can actually print out ebooks, from the computer, or you can actually make just a few. So it's very important to think that all of these things, all of these activities are still human activities. That the technology is simply an extension of thinking. and your thinking. It's an extension of your thinking. So you can define who you are through the way that you think about technology and make structures. I make charts actually of thinking. Think first in this part, possibly an internal, interpersonal, and then intrapersonal. As you move out into others, how are you bringing your ideas to others where they can actually accept those ideas? It's very important also to see how the research is what is helping us mostly in control of certain ideas. We're going to know that in this 21st century, students or we, writers, people who need to be able to write in any capacity, whether you're a professional or you're skilled through self-study, which is also amazing. You possess qualities of memory. And one of my books that I'd like you to take a look at is The Fourth R, where I talk about Hispanic American literature as having a very, very great point for us to be able to see that testimonials, stories of what it's been like to be in everyday experiences. I also think that it's important that we use life story writing to recount experiences that may help us to find thesis. So over and beyond these discussions that I'm having with you right now, I'd like you to be able to see how we, yes, I apologize, my mouse isn't working. There's no control over the world. I really apologize about that. But I am still trying to continue with my lecture. So I'm going to be talking about, just as we can see the slides in Google Docs, I did give a link to that, and also in the Prezi. You can see that the vast amount of research that I've done on this starts with the idea of pedagogy, metacognitive pedagogy, can improve human learning and achievement. I teach activities that support preparation for learning, to teach anyone to be a cognitive mapper. So even today, as we hear my voice and we can understand that there are places where you can go to gather this information in Maryann DiEdwardo blog, Maryann DiEdwardo in Google Docs, Maryann DiEdwardo, I'm just basically talking to you about how I've made myself open to metacognitive processes. And these are according actually to a scholar who is named Sternberg. He believes that the theory of intelligence is very much based in metacognitive processes that figure out how to do a task and ensure that the processes are performed correctly. One of the things that it's very important to do in research and education is to have possibly endnotes, to use different types of online programs. I like to use Microsoft Office and EndNotes to have multiple citations. So if we were going to look at multiple citations in this context, Howard Gardner, Frames of Mind, 1983, and this is all in my PowerPoint PDF that you can find in Google Docs, and we're going to be showing that to you and linking that to you for this entire year in the OpenSim community with the lecturers like me. Participation, therefore, in a learning community that is vast in as many online settings as possible will enhance the quality of your learning and the learning that you can bring to your whatever community you're in. And it can be a family community, it can be, your community in your neighborhood, or a larger community. Because as we see ourselves more engaged, we persist and learn, continue learning. We can grow as writers. We're not going to be afraid to write then, because we're writing in small units. This idea, again, going back to the think, pair, share, is to think of one thing maybe that you learned today, share it with one other person, and then you've done that. You've gone out from your sphere, from your metacognition, your mind, into sharing it with someone else. And that reaction then possibly could be blogged or Facebooked, or because it's something that you're doing, you're taking action. According to Cross in 1998, the pedagogy of learning community, where we're outside of ourselves, enhances our learning and persists and enriches our professional lives. And I agree with Cross, and I hope that you'll agree with me too, that you need to be part of communities. And in the world of cyber learning, it's very important that you experience different communities. Always going back to the paradigm of active learning, where if you want to teach anybody anything, try to get them to do it right away. And that brings us also to another context of global, multi-ethnic, and ageless audiences. To write, we engage memories of readings, life experiences, and it's very also important to think that these patterns of voice on the written page are still the same as they were before technology happened. So, for example, if you thought of something like social justice, I think about that a lot. And I think about social justice in the work that I do, gender neutral equality, archetypes, where we're living out identities through our stories and our emotions. We can see this in film and art, and of course in, again, the open simulator community, which is fabulous for this kind of thing, because we can create our avatar, but we're in a community, which is really important. So it ends up that we're telling our life histories. We're writing our stories in the new writing of the 21st century, and it's about freeing ourselves from anything. So I would like to tell you that we're getting close to the end of the presentation, and the most important thing to note is that learning strategies based on metacognitive processes will focus on self-discovery with a cognitive, logical, and spatial thinking structure, socialization, and conversation. And so, again, you can contact me at Maryann DiEdwardo's blog. It's really actually more interactive if you contact me through email at diedwardo7@gmail.com. I can forward the slides to you, and also any other information that you need. So this has been a great experience to share these things with you. We have time for questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Maryann? That was very interesting, Maryann.
Thank you.
While we're waiting for some questions to come in, I have a question, if it's all right that I ask.
Yes.
I was listening to you talk about the short thoughts on Twitter and Facebook, and as a history teacher, that in a way goes completely against the way that we teach history. Do you see the two perhaps melding together? The difference between reading the textbook and listening to the lectures of the complex kind of thinking and the short thinking that you're talking about. Do you see those coming together?
Yes, I actually have a book called Writing Based on History. It's published by Author House, and you can look up my books on Author House. And what I promote there is actually in an archive that I did for Lehigh University called the Pocahontas Archive. And what I did there was I used I used my metacognition, my thinking, to look at real archives that were used in the paintings of Howard Chandler Christie to recreate Pocahontas and make her look like a Christie girl. And I argued that because I was able to touch and feel these actual historical archives at Lafayette College, I then was able to publish an article on the site to discuss how the artists use these archives in an anti-feminist way. So I think what you can do is go out and take the student from just the historical fact and go to the site, go to Gettysburg. You know, I mean, they often can't do that, but sometimes they can go virtually, you know, to Gettysburg. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. In fact, that is something that I have been doing, particularly, say, with the Palace at Versailles, France, is to send students there via Google, which is very helpful.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Since you're having trouble with your mouse, do you mind if I give you the next question in voice?
No, that'd be fine.
Okay, this is from Stephen. How often do you see students taking to academic, thoughtful discussion in online spaces?
Stephen, I see them doing that in my classroom in two ways. The first way at University of Maryland is to talk on what we call a discussion board, and then to take that to a more active chat. And I do chats every Monday in that cyber university. So I think that I'm using the chat as the vehicle to put more material for them, example essays and so forth, and links. And they always say that the chat helps them, so I hope that helps you.
Okay.
Were you able to hear that? Yes?
Yes, that sounded fine. Yes. Any other questions for Maryann? Anyone else? Okay, then it looks like that is the end of our session today. Thank you, Maryann, for a terrific presentation.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
As a reminder to our audience, you can see what's coming up on the conference schedule at conference.opensimulator.org. The next session in this track will be OpenSim K-12 Power Panel, Effectively Engaging and Teaching Grade Schoolers in Self-Hosted Virtual Worlds, with Andrea Benassi, Annalisa Boniello, David Deeds, Mary Howard, Carolyn Lowe, Amy Filianen, and Andrew Wheelock at 10 a.m., and I'm very sorry if I got those names right or wrong. Thank you again to our speaker and the audience. We'll be back shortly with the next session.